Hello everyone, my name is Oliver Muchiri and so excited to join Dennis on the Beneath the Impact podcast. Just for fun, Dennis has looked for me for almost 2 months. He traveled all over the world. And fun fact also, what have I been doing with those travels is actually advising our clients on how to design and develop community-led business models across sub-Saharan Africa and across low to mid-income countries. And that is exactly what we're going to be talking about. So I think, Dennis, it was worth the wait because now I come with more experience and insights about what I have been doing in my travels. So stay tuned, like and subscribe, and watch.
Hello guys, welcome to Beneath the Impact podcast, where we go beyond headlines to feature change makers. So today we'll be looking in terms of one hot topic around social impact space, and it's around the funding crisis, and it's here already. So after 5 years of growth, whereby the developmental aid has been growing in 5 years, on the 6th year has dipped. And these consequences is seen. One, we see a lot of job losses. For example, in this space, most organizations are closing down, but also in terms of services that were offered with these organizations, especially in places such as health in Kenya, whereby we see things such as HIV prevention, access to drugs, are not really accessible at this moment. So for decades, we have had these conversations within areas whereby people associate aid with dependence. Mm-hmm. That's one key thing. And this is because of many questions that are asked within the projects that are being supported, such as relevance. Is the project relevant? Is the accountability aspect as well? Effectiveness of the approaches which they use, the impact, and also the sustainability of the strides which are made. Now we do not have a choice but to find a better way. So today I'm joined here with Oliver Muchiri, who is a management consultant at ThinkPlace, whereby he's working around supporting social initiatives to design them and make sure they have impact within communities. So by the end of the episode, we hope that you get something from this, whereby you get a real-world case experience, whereby I would ask him to share this. And stay tuned to hear more on this. And welcome, Oliver.
One is very good to join your podcast and to also see what you're doing with Beneath the Impact. My name is Oliver Muchiri, like you've correctly said. I work at ThinkPlace. I lead one of our practices that is called Service Design and System Strengthening. And I'll speak more about that when we speak about the practical projects that reference that topic. But I've been at ThinkPlace for the last 4.5 years now as a human-centered designer, as a behavioral designer in terms of experience. And it's been a good ride. My work every day is to work with communities to solve their most meaningful problems. And I say meaningful intentionally because we'll get to expound that, because that's one of the things we're going to talk about when it comes to community-led initiatives and business models. Before that, I worked in the finance world and transitioned into this design world. I call myself sometimes a jack of all trades, but all of it just in the consulting world. And my background is in finance from my university days, but I think I found a lot of joy and contentment in the work that I currently do and in the challenges that we truly get to solve every day at ThinkPlace. So thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. So maybe we can start by you letting us know what is local-led development in your own words.
Right. I define local-led development in a very different way, maybe from how people understand. And I'll start with how it has been defined before and how we're defining it now. It's been defined as community-owned, community-led, and communities actually owning the challenges and driving them. But it lacks a key aspect, that communities cannot do that on their own. It is true that communities or locally led means community driving their own solutions, owning their own challenges, coming up with tools to design around their own challenges. But in addition to that, it is communities recognizing, or us as designers recognizing, that communities alone cannot do that. So you have to partner with the private sector, with governments, with international NGOs, with these donors that we are talking about. So it's about partnership, but also realizing that this is now equal partnership. Before, it has been the people who have the muscles of finance, technical capability, being the ones who are seated at the top of the table. But now we're saying community ownership or local-led ownership is about these two being equal partners, because both of them actually have something that they actually bring to the table. So local ownership, locally led initiatives is recognizing that communities truly deserve an equal seat at the table, just as these other people who plug finances. And we'll speak about what this community is actually going to bring to this table.
Yeah, that's quite interesting,
Yep.
What you're bringing about. And maybe we can differentiate between the local-led initiatives and development and participatory, because I think sometimes people confuse that because they want them to participate.
Correct.
Yeah, so what is the major difference around those two things?
That's actually, it's a good question and a good way to reflect around it. If we start off with participatory approaches, how they have been defined before is you have a challenge. So, for example, take a donor or a government or an NGO or a charitable organization, could be also the private sector as well, has identified a challenge in their community. And so because now we have been having these conversations of they have to be defined by the communities, we have to understand through the lens of the communities, what do? You go to the communities and ask them lines of inquiry in accordance with what you have identified as a challenge in that community. So that is what you could call participation, because you're not doing it alone. You're not seated in your lofty office designing these solutions. You're going to them, understanding that challenge, and designing, for example, with them. When it comes to local ownership, there are two key things that are really important. Number one is that this challenge that you're trying to solve for, is it truly a challenge for this community? We could be trying, for example, to say that we want to build roads for a community in rural Malawi, but all that community, for example, maybe wants is water. And it's interesting, maybe they don't want roads to go and fetch water. Women might actually want to be able to walk together to a water point and be able to share stories along the way. But the challenge is water. So the biggest challenge has been, are we truly solving for the right challenge? And the right challenge can only come from the community. So that is truly local ownership. And number two, and this is also a very critical one, and we've seen that in some projects we've done in Africa, is do we have an aspect of closing the loop, which is very important to distinguish between local ownership and community participation. Because participatory activities do this. They extract information and use that information to design solutions. But local ownership and realizing that communities truly are at the table, are the drivers of their challenges, is understanding the challenge from actually identifying a meaningful challenge for them, understanding it from their local perspectives, and designing solutions with them, and finally closing the loop in terms of communicating the solutions you've actually developed, and then moving the ownership towards them. And I see those facets as what we describe as local ownership.
That's quite interesting, because even I think in the last podcast we were talking about how to close the loop, because most of the time most people take the data, goes up,
correct,
but never comes down
They
again.
do not close the loop. And you know what that leads to is exactly the things we speak about. The communities don't trust certain entities anymore, or communities have lost trust in governments, in the donor fraternity, because they're used to every time tell us about this challenge. It's about being extractive as compared to truly designing with and for them, and actually designing for meaningful challenges within this community. So closing the loop is, I think, if there's actually a challenge I would throw out to even our listeners, and especially people in the development sector, consultants in the development sectors, is to ensure that as you solve and design with communities, ensure that you actually close the loop and just don't leave it hanging.
I think that's quite punchline.
In
the beginning.
Punchline.
So why do communities often feel projects are done for them rather than done with them? So why is that? Is it that loop alone, or is there any other aspect within that project as well?
There's still more. I would actually say it's a very complex challenge in this regard. So closing the loop is a big one, for sure. It's because oftentimes, like I've said, it's been very extractive. People go and design solutions and then come and put them to the communities. But there's no closing the loop in terms of, did it work? Feedback from the community. How is this solution working? What does it mean for this community to own this solution going forward? So closing the loop is actually one. A big other one that we've actually seen, and this is from a project we actually did in Malawi, which we call the community labs. And maybe just to speak a bit about the project, we were trying to design what you call community labs for communities to design around uptake of oral prep. It was at the time when Malawi was actually, the government of Malawi was trying to increase the uptake of oral prep to prevent HIV cases that were on the rise in the country. Now, as designers, our brief from our partners from the donor organizations and the government we are working with is design a community lab where health practitioners and a few members of the community will come together, generate insights, and co-design interventions together with us as designers to come up with demand interventions for oral prep. But over and above that, what we learned and what made the community labs we designed in Malawi very strong is that we set up the community labs not as a structure for oral prep uptake only. We set it up as a structure that can actually be used to co-design other challenges that these communities are going to face in future. Now, look at oral prep, for example. Let's assume maybe down the line, HIV is no longer a menace in Malawi. Something else will be a menace. Maybe it will be cholera. Maybe it will be a pandemic like we have seen recently. But did we as designers and our donor partners leave strong structures where we do not have to be called again by the government to design demand interventions to deal with a pandemic or cholera outbreak or any other uptake of any other solution? Did we leave the community empowered with structures and systems to be able to design their challenges going forward, such that if think place or say a certain global donor or government is not there, can this community take up the challenge on their own? That right there is also what we're calling about local ownership, local challenges being at the hands of the communities. And if we can be able to do that as a design community, as the social impact community, then I think we'll have made a difference in the world.
That's great. Currently, we are seeing a lot of push, especially with NGOs, that's the development partners, same as funders,
right,
towards community-led initiatives. What do you think, or rather in your experience, what is pushing that narrative towards that?
And are we saying, is it that we're seeing the NGOs also rally towards, embrace the model, I think one thing is because there's no other alternative. There truly is no other alternative. The future we use, one of the things to actually realize, community-led initiatives are not new. Community-led business models are not new. It's been spoken about, but it is being spoken to in reference to this is the future. But the future is here. So you do not have an option but to embrace the future, because otherwise you become irrelevant. So NGOs, the social sector is looking for ways to embrace this future and cope with this future. Now, and because of also one of the things that you actually spoke about, Dennis, at the very beginning of the podcast is donor aid is shrinking. So what will you do? Because as an NGO, you do not have money, you do not generate income or revenue. You rely on donor aid, on grants and all of those kinds of sources of revenue to be able to support your communities. Now that money is no longer there. Your bank reserves are no longer being able to support kind of a programmatic kind of intervention. So the only way you can continue to drive this impact, and I credit the NGO world in terms of wanting to drive impact, is to support community ownership, is to support community-led business models. That way then you continue to be able to make a meaningful impact. And I think the outlook, if we were to also continue looking into the future, the outlook is, I do not think, for example, in my own personal capacity, that NGOs are going to be scrapped off the face of earth. I think they're going to play a role if they adjust. For example, remember what I said at the very beginning, that community-led business models are not meant to isolate communities and say, now you own the challenge, now drive your solution on your own. Community-led business models have the effect, or actually should take into consideration, that partnerships are important. Your best bet will be your usual NGOs who are going to continue to build your technical capabilities, technical capacities, who are going to help you source for funds. And maybe we'll get to a point where we talk about the biggest challenges that community-led initiatives and community-led business models are experiencing. And I see that linkage of that role still being played by the social impact donor, NGO kind of community. So they have a role to play, but they would have to adjust their model of operation from one where you just give money and give more money for the same project here on here, is to give more funds, to give more support beyond money, technical capabilities, kind of support to these initiatives.
Yeah. From what I'm getting is basically we have to have a mindset shift, one, to move towards more of partnership rather than you're the one to empower.
There you go. Exactly. Now, this is a partnership, and you're going to be equals. Because as a community, I give you my insights. I give you systems that have existed where we can develop these interventions. On the other hand, you help me, for example, look for money or the technical capabilities to be able to run these community initiatives that the community is running. So it's a win-win, actually, for both parties, and a give-take kind of situation as compared to the old model that we spoke about, where you have one person who's seated here and the other person who's seated here. Now, the new model is here. And not because we are giving communities, not because it's not a meritocratic system, it's because it's a meritocratic system. We're saying communities have something they're actually bringing. And the donor world or the social impact world also has something that they're actually bringing. And I think if we can recognize that as the new way of thinking, as a new model, or what you call the mind shift, then I think then that will make a lot of sense.
Awesome. Then maybe we can look in terms of sustainability as well, because that's one thorn which is usually there.
It is.
Tell us more about community business models. And how can it bring up the sustainability aspect? I think we have talked about relevance.
Correct.
Using the whole CLI model. But now sustainability.
Correct. It's good that you talk about community-led business models, because business models is a term that has been used before in the private sector. And I've been lucky to be in both worlds, because I've worked a lot in the private sector and the corporate world, and I know business model is lingo that is very big there. But now business models is also lingo that we're bringing to the social impact sector, because you're saying communities have to be able, you see, community-led initiatives cannot be tokenism, cannot be saying we want to empower the communities to be able to solve the challenge of, say, lack of nutritious meals. It has to be communities are able to solve, to address the challenge, say, of uptake of nutritious meals, say, for children, but also can this community also make meaningful livelihood from that process? Again, that also has to be taken into consideration. So it can't be tokenism, it has to be the best of both worlds. Now, that's why then we have moved to the model that you correctly called the CLBMs, or what we call the community-led business models. It leads to impact, it leads to livelihood. Social impact and livelihood. It's also a very intricate world there, because profit and impact have rarely existed, And we're not talking about profit now here. We're saying decent livelihood for the people who are going to run these business models. And as they do get that decent livelihood, they're also solving for a challenge in their community. For example, the one I spoke about, uptake of nutritious meals for children. So as we look into that kind of sustainability lens, then we have to think of community initiatives not as just initiatives, but as businesses. That is number one, to ensure that we're talking about sustainability. Because if you look at it as a business, then you start realizing, it is not just about social impact. It is not just about eradicating a certain kind of challenge. It is doing that while you also create meaningful livelihoods for the people who are doing that. So that's what that's why the conversation for CLBMs has become very important to us, and we've spoken about it a lot, because it integrates the best of those two worlds, and we see sustainability as being supported by that. Maybe something else to add, and I think this is a reiteration of the first point I made around partnerships. The CLBMs, that model is actually designed and anchored in a partnership model, and I'll speak about a project in Ethiopia that we did. But it says that communities plus their partners, and their partners could be a local private sector company, an international private sector company, a local NGO, an international NGO, a government. A partner could just be anyone, even an individual, say, person like us, could also be partners. So sustainability is also saying community-led business models are not just going to be left by the people who are experiencing the challenge you're designing for, but recognizing that sustainability also looks into partnerships to drive those business models into the future. That way, we're seeing practical examples of longevity of these business models. And maybe to give our audience a practical example so that we're also moving from theory into practice of how this is being done, we recently worked on a project in Ethiopia, and the project was doublefold. It was looking at addressing the challenge of incontinence, urinary incontinence, and number two, also looking at the challenge of fecal waste management for children below the age of 3. Incontinence for adults, fecal waste management for children below the age of 3. If you deal or manage incontinence, then you give people a decent livelihood. People have no shame, and people can feel a sense of belonging, because we know the shame that comes with incontinence. Now, when it comes to fecal waste management, you prevent disease in communities because people or children wouldn't be encouraged to practice open defecation. And so the challenge there was, can we design community-led business models that empower the communities to design sanitary solutions to deal with this double challenge of incontinence and fecal waste management? And that led to the community-led business models that we designed in Ethiopia, in Gambela and East Hararge. And I like that model because it goes back to the basics that I spoke about. It goes to the partnerships models, and it goes back to the basics of social impact and livelihoods. Now, when we start about partnerships, when we designed and developed the community-led business models, which are now, we call them productive cooperatives, and you could call them whatever name you want in any country. In Ethiopia, it's production cooperatives. Now, they're being run by young men, young women, older men and older women, who are the people who are producing these sanitary solutions. But they're being supported by a local NGO called Nigat in Ethiopia to be able to produce, solutions that are also quality. To be able to guide these production cooperatives on where to purchase the materials that are needed. They're also supporting them to look for markets. On the other hand, they also have international NGOs who are helping them with marketing. International NGOs are giving them access to, say, a big NGO in Ethiopia who will purchase these sanitary solutions and then maybe go and give them out for free to relevant communities. So partnerships will always be needed. So let's not forget about that context. Number two is these production cooperatives are ensuring that the people who are producing these sanitary solutions are earning money. They're earning a livelihood from that. And as you do that, you also produce solutions that deal with the challenge of incontinence, and number two, deal with fecal waste management in the country. Again, in a nutshell, if we're talking about sustainability of this new model called community-led business models, it banks on, number one, partnerships with any partner. Again, we are not proposing any partner. It's partnerships with anyone who is willing to partner with you. It's looking at social impact. It's also looking at building livelihoods. If then we can do those three things together, then we are talking about impact.
I think that's quite impactful, especially in terms of how the partnerships came into both, because I can see most people would ask, how will we get, for example, capital to start up?
Correct. It is a big challenge because you see, on paper, CLBMs are very fancy.
Yeah.
Very beautiful. If you when you look at the decks we have designed about CLBMs, they are beautiful. It almost shows an African dream. Communities could drive their own challenges. Communities could be at the driver's seat. Communities could own their own solutions. But the implementation part of it is complex. Because, for example, we're talking about communities in Gambela. It's refugee settings, places that are also very far-flung. If you're going to run a production factory for sanitary solutions, it will not cost 1 shilling. It will not cost 1 beer in Ethiopia. It's going to cost a lot of money. These communities, in every honesty, do not have the financial muscle to pull some of these things. And that is the realization we have to live with and live by that. Partnerships are going to help plug some of these gaps. Financial resources, even the technical capability to be able to produce these solutions. So we have to realize that community-led business models are not saying, communities can drive their own things. I think we have seen even in the world, some of the best businesses, even globally, are built on partnerships. Yeah. So why is community-led business models are different and we are calling them businesses now? Yeah, it's not different anyway.
So what are the challenges that, for example, a person or rather an NGO that is hoping to start on community-led business models
Yeah.
should anticipate to face?
Yeah. There are many.
Yeah.
So I would like to say that overall, in the development consulting sector, I think we're on track to continue advising clients to design these models. However, there are many remaining challenges that have to be tackled. But one of the things to realize, and also to our audience, is these challenges do not mean that CLBMs will not work. It just means that we still have a long way to go. We still have work to do and to roll our sleeves, but it is possible and doable. Now, there are multiple challenges, but I'll highlight what we have seen as the key ones. Number one is just lack of financial resources, just the lack of the financial muscle. Remember what you said, Dennis, at the very beginning, that donor aid is shrinking. We're moving from a model that has relied too heavily on donor aid. Now, without that, or with that shrinking, then we're talking about resources being unavailable. And again, one of the ways we are plugging that gap is saying partnerships does not just mean a community and a donor, a community and an NGO. Partnerships could also mean this community, for example, the production cooperatives in Ethiopia, plus a local private entity in Ethiopia, or an international private entity in Ethiopia. So what we are saying is the challenge of financial resources could be cured through expanding that partnership network and moving from the mindship of just donor and grants. There are many other avenues of resources and funds, and we have seen that practically. Yeah, so that's number one. Number two is the technical capabilities of communities to be able to drive these businesses to reasonable levels where you're making impact and truly making decent livelihoods for the people who are working there. Now, to do that, again, boils down to the partnerships that you're also having. But also these partnerships also have to be how we are designing them as designers is we're designing them in a way that ensures that this capacity, this technical capacity is being passed down to the communities. Like, for example, the production cooperatives in Ethiopia, the aim was not for the private entity in IGAT to continue training these communities, but it's to train them and ensure that they actually get that capability to be able to continue driving that production and pass that capability to other production cooperatives that will be open. So there's a challenge of a technical capability doesn't mean continuous year-on trainings. It ensures that training that is enough to ensure that communities can also be able to drive that kind of, say, production, in this case, on their own. And the last one, I think, is, and this is going to be a very hard one, is just a natural shift of people from a donor-aided model to a community-led business model. We have been so used to donor-aided models. And I mean, look at Africa, for example, the continent we both come from, or from any other low-mid-income country. You are used and you're wired to believing that the only way communities can be able to solve their challenges is if there's donor aid. So moving or shifting that mindset from a donor-funded, donor-reliant kind of community initiative to a community-led underlying business model is going to be a very big mindset shift that, say, the development consulting industry is going to grapple with in the coming days and months.
Yeah. It all looks like it's something that we can do and also think around them.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
So given, I think I've heard a lot, and even our previous guests say like Africans, we are community people. So I think this is a familiar field.
It is a familiar field.
Yeah.
You know, it's very interesting. The other day, as we were designing community, we were rethinking the design of community-led business models in the office and how we want to shape them, how we want to position them, how we want to advise our clients. One of the things we kept reminding our teams and also our clients is community-led business models are not new. Remember how the best schools, for example, in Kenya were built. Yeah. It was owned by the communities. It's people who built the alliances of this country. Remember about old religious institutions or old religious movements that made an impact on people. They were designed by the community. So this concept is not new. It's only a concept that was novel back in the day. I believe it was overtaken by global shifts, for example, in donor aid and becoming too over-reliant on donor aid. And communities did forget their power. And we're saying community-led business models now are about designing and recognizing that communities now have to be brought back to the pedestal. It is not new. It's probably a reincarnation of the past.
Yeah, and even the current, because, for example, chamas in Kenya.
Yeah, correct. Chamas have been there for the longest.
And
they're still the most effective way of ensuring, say, people are empowered. I mean, we've seen chamas. And actually, chama across Africa is a big thing. Yeah. It is a big thing across the country. Many countries call them different names, but it boils down to a chama. It boils down to a chama. Yeah. You could even call CLBMs chamas if you want to simplify it in a way that is easier for people to understand. That's the whole concept of it. But now we're adding a business component to it and saying this is not about handouts and just giving out money and just doing merry-go-rounds. Is more of a business mindset. And again, that mindset is not going to be easy for people, especially if you're coming from an NGO or donor-aided kind of model or thinking.
Awesome. Yeah. So I think you mentioned about the future.
Yeah.
So maybe I want you to think and build 10 years. Yeah. Where do you see a community-led business models? Yeah. And how will it play along, especially in making the social impact?
Yeah. It's a good question to ask, because 10 years could mean a lot of things. 10 years could also mean that donor aid has come back. The reason donor aid right now has taken, say, a cut is probably because of regime changes over the world.
Yeah, and wars.
Correct. And wars and whatnot. And money now being shifted towards things like wars, as compared to, say, priority areas like community challenges. Again, it's a global conversation in that regard. But assuming status quo remains and donor aid continues to shrink, we see the numbers tanking and all of those things. I think, and again, building back to my points, 10 years from now, I would see a development sector or world that has shifted from a traditional donor model to a community-led business model. I would want the CLBMs to become a household name. You see how we talk about donor aid, or the EU is giving Kenya or communities in northern Kenya or in the coast or in central Kenya or wherever part of Kenya a certain amount, and people are clapping and saying, sasa hawa watasaidika. I would want us to move, and you go to a household and people are having banter in their house and all they're talking is, did you hear about these community-led business models where they're actually designing a certain pad to deal with, say, incontinence, or a certain pad to deal with women's health or men's health? If we can have those as your day-to-day conversations in the household, then truly you have won on one big font, because then mindset shift is very important, because you're moving people from let's wait for America to give us money, or for the EU, like you spoke, or from whichever country, from whichever donor to give us money, to, we can actually lead our own initiatives and partner with them and other partners within the continent to be able to drive our own solutions. So I think a narrative shift 10 years down the line would make a lot of sense, and I think that's where I would see this headed towards. And I think number 2 is CLBMs truly having taken root in governments. And I say governments because governments over time are going to become very big players in terms of being partners for these communities. Government are also the sole responsible people for solving some of the challenges in communities. It is their responsibility. So if government can have policies in place to support the development of CLBMs, how they are structured, how they are supported. For example, one of the things we were seeing in Ethiopia when we started those production cooperatives was tax. Tax was going to be very punitive for those communities because, for example, if you're purchasing locally, you're going to be hit with massive taxes, from VAT and maybe corporate income tax later on to withholding tax. There's a lot of tax in terms, and that's just one part of regulation. Regulation could also mean embedding CLBMs into policy and saying, if, for example, we have a partner, say, from whichever country in the world, who wants to fund certain initiatives in our communities, they will not do so just through grants. They will do so through the drivers we have in place, the CLBMs. So if CLBMs can be put into policy and that becomes a way of governing the country, not only in Kenya but across the continent, then again, that would be a very big win. And I think the last one, and this also remains very close to me, is to see CLBMs continue to deliver the double fold that I spoke about. They will still continue. They will not be corrupt to become just full businesses that care about profit. Is that they will continue to show that indeed there's a world where social impact and better livelihoods can exist. And I think if we can have a world 10 years on the line where CLBMs maintain that fidelity of we will continue to make social impact and will continue to make decent livelihoods for the people working in these CLBMs, then that would make a lot of sense 10 years on the line. I think if I could see those three things come into play, I think would have won this concept, and I think would have shifted a lot in the world.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Any parting shot?
I think, I believe, and this is my bet, and I'm willing to put my 2 cents on this. Or somebody said these days it's called 10 cents because inflation is too high. It's no longer 2 cents. Yeah. So I'm willing to put my 10 cents on this. Yeah. But I think the future, truly the future, is businesses that are owned and driven by the communities. That is where the future is. And I think even big businesses are going to bet on these small businesses growing into bigger businesses. And maybe that's also where the resource and the money and the investment is going to be. And you know what that could mean? It could mean that Africa could shift, low mid-income countries could shift and could be viewed differently. And this could be a model we drive and own as a people and truly remain proud of. And I think that's what all of us should be aiming for.
Awesome. Thank you very much for joining us. This is the end of this discussion, and hopefully it's not the end. It's just the beginning.
It's the beginning of the conversation. It's the beginning of the conversation.
Yeah.
Correct.
In terms of how do we leverage community-led business models and to solve our problems anyway.
Correct.
So continue to subscribe to the channel for more content such as this. Maybe I'll bring Oliver next time to talk difference between this and what we call medium and small scale enterprises.
Yes, that will also be a very interesting topic to speak about. It will be. And thank you, Dennis, for having me and for this conversation. Like you said, we hope this is the beginning of our robust conversations around CLBMs. And I can't wait to see our audience engage with this, but also I can't wait to see what your podcast brings forth in the months and in the years to come. So asante sana.
Thank you for being here. Thank you. Continue being Beneath the Impact.
Thanks for tuning in to Beneath the Impact, where we go beyond the numbers and narratives to uncover what really drives change. If today's conversation sparked a thought, shifted your perspective, or started a question, don't keep it to yourself. Share this episode, subscribe, leave us a comment, and join the conversation online. You can find us at beneath.the.impact on all socials. Until next time, stay curious, stay grounded, and keep digging beneath the impact.